section on Craigslist called Casual Encounters, where people would seek casual relationships and hookups. This section mainly had ads from questionable women and older men looking for such interactions. However, Craigslist removed this section a long time ago for clear reasons. I was one of those men seeking casual encounters, and before you judge me, please hear me out, because I have my reasons. I've been married twice, and both marriages ended in a bad way, causing me to lose everything and start over from scratch. My first wife was my high school sweetheart. She went to college while I attended trade school. After she graduated, she found a job, and we got married. A few years later, we had a son. I was working on building my business during this time, putting in long and exhausting hours. I was rarely at home, so my wife decided to reduce her working hours, and despite not having a college degree, I was making more money than her. It was an arrangement we agreed upon to allow her to spend more time with our son. We were both 25 years old at the time. However, despite this agreement, my wife would frequently complain about my long working hours, even though she knew that I was dedicated to building my business, which was evident from the income I was bringing home. She would often start arguments with me when I returned home, tired, and simply wanted to rest. The situation took a troubling turn when she began accusing me of having affairs with other women out of the blue, which caught me by surprise, and I didn't address it, thinking it would eventually resolve itself. Things didn't improve between us. I even went to the extent of turning on the location feature on my phone so my wife could always know where I was. But she kept on insisting that I left my phone behind and went somewhere else to cheat on her. Truth is, I was never cheating. I didn't even have the time to cheat because I was swamped with work. My business was at a point where I had to be there all the time, or else it would fail. I tried to make things better by calling my wife every 2 hours, thinking it would help ease her suspicions. But I noticed that when I called her between 1 to 4 o'clock, she wouldn't answer. That got me thinking. Maybe she was accusing me of cheating because she was doing just that. I discovered that her phone's location feature showed she was always at home, so I decided to drive by my street and see for myself during those hours when she wouldn't pick up her phone. I parked on the street corner near my house and watched as my 19-year-old neighbor's son left my house. I was shocked. I couldn't believe she would stoop so low, all the while accusing me of infidelity when she was having a relationship with our neighbor's teenage son. When I confronted her, she initially denied it until I threatened to tell the neighbor's parents. Then she admitted to it and tried to blame me, saying it was my fault that she cheated. She claimed if I wasn't so focused on my stupid business, she wouldn't have strayed. This stupid business was the same one that provided for our family. Our son was just 3 years old at the time, and despite everyone, including my parents, trying to convince me to work things out, I refused. This led to a bitter divorce that cost me my business. I made sure to expose my ex-wife's affair to all our friends and the parents of our 19-year-old neighbor. I even got into a big fight with the neighbor because I was deeply hurt that this young guy was involved with my wife. It's a long story, and I won't go into all the details, but the divorce was a bitter one. I lost my house, and my business eventually went under. My ex-wife thought she could use our son against me because she knew how much I was making from my previous tax returns. So I decided to take cash instead of using credit or debit cards to avoid the government tracking my income. This way I wouldn't have to pay her a lot of child support, as she seemed to want to rely on that money. The court garnished very little money, so she had to rejoin the workforce, and she struggled as a single mum. I didn't escape unscathed either, as my scorched earth strategy significantly affected my business, and I had to downsize. A few months after my divorce, I should have taken a break to heal, but instead I fell in love with another woman, and our relationship escalated quickly. She knew how I disliked cheaters and offered a shoulder for me to lean on. Little did I know that her infidelity would be even worse than my first wife's. To make matters worse, I had hired her earlier in my business, and she managed my financial records, accounting, and payroll. I even made her a partner in the business. A year later, we walked down the aisle, and a year after that, she gave birth to a baby girl. I was thrilled and loved the child with all my heart. As the baby grew, family and friends often commented that she didn't resemble me, but I took it lightly since my wife was the attractive one, and I thought it was meant as a compliment. However, because of my past experience with infidelity in my previous marriage, I was always vigilant. When the child turned 5, I decided to get a DNA test, and to my surprise, the girl wasn't biologically mine. As you might expect, I didn't handle this situation well. I made threats towards my ex-wife and myself, and I even held her at gunpoint, which led to the police being called. Fortunately, the police didn't use deadly force, but I was arrested and taken to a psychiatric ward. It was a difficult time. While I was there, my ex-wife divorced me and took everything we had amassed together, both before and after we met. With the support of family, friends, and some compassionate medical staff, whom I consider heroes, I started to recover during my 7-month stay in the psychiatric ward. It turned out that she had been cheating on me with multiple clients and one of my employees. She couldn't sustain the business without my involvement, so she took all the money from the business account and disappeared. She also obtained a restraining order against me, given the circumstances of me holding her hostage and threatening her life, so the judge granted it easily. That was the lowest point in my life, and it was when I truly came to understand the depths of depression. I had nowhere to live, no cars, and not a single dollar to my name. Nevertheless, I managed to pick myself up and started my business for the 3rd time. During this period, my first wife was going through a difficult time as well. She tried to re-enter my life, feeling responsible for the way things had turned out. However, during my time in confinement, I had made a promise to myself to stay away from relationships and focus on building my life independently, knowing that I could thrive on my own. During this time, I stayed in touch with my son and visited him regularly. I had no income to report, and after my 7-month stay in the psychiatric ward, my ex-wife gave up any hope of receiving child support. But when I got out and re-established my business, I supported her and worked on developing a relationship with my son. I worked really hard, and because I didn't have any women in my life holding me back, I managed to do better than ever over the course of 3 years. I wasn't rich, but I was leading a comfortable life. I went on some dates here and there, but I never took any woman seriously because I had lost my ability to trust them. Besides, I was too busy with work to commit to a relationship. If any woman I was dating at the time wanted me to choose her over work, I would break up with them without hesitation. My time was valuable to me, and my approach to relationships was very businesslike. I didn't care if a woman loved me. I just wanted to relax, and any attractive woman available at the time was enough. I met women on dating sites, went on multiple dates with them before having sex, and it felt to me like the multiple dates were a waste of time and money. If the goal was simply to have sex, why not just pay for it and save time and money? I know this might sound a bit crude, but my time was precious, and I didn't want to spend it on dates with women who were just okay. I had to listen to their conversation before getting some average intimacy, and they often acted like they were doing me a favor after I'd already spent a significant amount of money on them, including both time and cash. Spending $10,000 for unsatisfactory encounters didn't sit well with me, so I decided to cut to the chase and pay for sex up front, making it a more straightforward transaction. I wouldn't have to deal with them afterward, and it seemed like a better deal for me. This was how I ended up becoming a client for sex workers and turned to Craigslist. I narrowed it down to about 5 girls who became my regulars, so I didn't have to look for new partners as often, To me it felt like a good deal because they understood it was a transaction, and if they were a little nicer, I might give them a tip. The customer service I received from the girls I had in my rotation was excellent. To be honest, maintaining a rotation of 5 girls who understood that our relationship was transactional was less expensive and more satisfying than having one wife. I didn't have to listen to their problems or deal with the everyday drama in their lives. I was also traveling more when I decided to take a break from work. I visited places like Vegas and even went to South America a couple of times. Fast forward a few years, and my son had just graduated from high school. He expressed his desire to join the military, likely influenced by my father, who had a military background. I had several family members in the military, so it wasn't unusual. Although I wasn't the military type due to the impact my father's absence had on my family when I was growing up, I couldn't object to my son's decision. I gave him my blessing and felt proud of his commitment to sacrifice for the greater good. He proposed to his girlfriend, and they got married before he left for his military service. At the time, I didn't know what to make of it, as I didn't want to be the dad who told his son not to marry the love of his life. Given how things had ended for me in my past relationships, I hoped it would be different for him. My ex-wife attended his wedding as well, and I even made a comment about it to her. She tried to downplay it, but I understood that for a young man out at sea, having someone to write love letters to and the comfort of coming home to someone were important, so I didn't want to deny him that. About 5 months after my son left, I began talking to a girl on Craigslist. We decided to meet in a public place with cameras to make introductions and ensure we were comfortable with each other. We had planned to meet up at a Starbucks near my house. I usually didn't bring them to my house unless I had seen them a few times. That evening, when I got there, she was already waiting for me. We had agreed on the price through email, as our initial conversation was done that way. I arrived at the Starbucks and waited in my car until she sent me an email saying she was inside, waiting. When I opened the door and walked in, I was taken by surprise. My son's wife was sitting in one of the chairs, wearing the same outfit as the woman I was supposed to meet. I had already given her a description of the person she was expecting, but there she was, my son's wife. I froze as soon as I saw her and considered running away, but she had locked her eyes on mine, and I could tell that she felt the same shock and surprise as I did. I was shocked by the situation. She was only 19, and I couldn't believe that a 19-year-old girl was involved in this. After the initial shock and shame wore off, my curiosity got the better of me. I wanted to understand her real story, to know how my son had met such a girl. She seemed ashamed and tried to leave, but I physically stopped her and convinced her to sit down. I asked her why she was doing this, especially since I thought she was in college. She explained that a friend had introduced her to this way of making money on the side. I inquired about how many times she had done this before, and she replied, 3 times. What surprised me even more was that she wanted me to keep it a secret from my son, and in return she offered to be intimate with me. I couldn't believe it. I told her that her marriage with my son was over, and what we should be discussing at that moment was who should tell him first. She attempted to explain that my son wouldn't take the news well, and it would break his heart. I acknowledged the difficulty of the situation, but mentioned that, if it were me, I would want to know the truth. She pleaded with me and even offered intimacy in exchange for my silence, but I firmly refused. Then she resorted to blackmail, which surprised me. I couldn't help but think, this little troublemaker. She threatened to expose my search for intimacy with women on Craigslist. I chuckled at her and, without hesitation, pulled out my phone, placed it on the table, opened WhatsApp, and started calling my son. When she realized what I was doing, she quickly ran out of the Starbucks. The phone kept ringing, and I hadn't expected my son to pick up, but he did. I asked him how he was doing and if he was ready to discuss something serious. I told him to find a seat and sit down because there was an important matter I needed to talk to him about. It wasn't a secret that I travelled and occasionally paid for intimacy with women. My ex-wife had known about it and used it against me when I refused to reconcile with her. She had disclosed it to my son some time ago, and he confronted me. I was honest with him. I'm not the type to sugarcoat things. I'm straightforward to a fault. I've never lied to my son, no matter how challenging or serious the situation was. I always take responsibility for my actions. So, it wasn't a surprise to him when I admitted to looking for intimacy on Craigslist. What truly left him speechless, however, was that his new wife had not only responded to those emails, but had been doing so for a long time. She claimed it was with 3 men, but I was convinced it was more than that. I decided to give him some time to process what I had just told him and let him know that he wasn't the only one who had been betrayed, as I was a living example of that. I assured my son that what had happened wasn't his fault, and I let him know that I would be there for him. That's how our conversation ended, and I headed home. After our call, my son tried reaching out to his wife multiple times, but she didn't respond. He realized I was telling the truth when she didn't answer as she was supposed to. She claimed I was lying, but my son was clever enough to see through her denials. Over the following week, there were back-and-forth phone calls, and it took several days for her to finally admit to seeking intimacy on Craigslist. As soon as he was granted leave, my son returned to divorce her. I understood how tough it was for him, and I did my best to support him. When his mother found out the reason for their separation, she tried to blame me. However, my son defended me, telling her that it was a blessing that I had discovered the truth, and even took a jab at her, questioning why people like her cheat on their partners. That silenced her rather quickly. I wasn't there to witness the conversation, but my son later told me how it had gone. Strangely enough, after his divorce, we grew even closer, and I started giving him advice on love and relationships. I never told him not to get married or be in a relationship, because everyone's circumstances are different. He might be luckier than his old man. What I did was share my experiences with him and let him make his own choices about how he wanted to live his life. These days, it's too risky to search for women on Craigslist. Since that incident, I've thrown myself into my work. I'm currently casually dating someone who, like me, is a divorcee with children, a demanding career, and a busy life. As I've grown older, I've come to appreciate the company of women who have substance and depth. However, I do occasionally travel abroad to experience some youthful energy. My son was honorably discharged from the military and is now working in the same field as I am. I hope that he'll eventually take over the business when I decide to retire. What's more, he has a serious girlfriend, and I've noticed that he's taking things slow and not rushing.